Officer Thomas Wilson tapped his fingers impatiently on the steering wheel of his patrol car. 6 hours into his shift in the quiet town of Oak Ridge, and nothing exciting had happened. Houses with neat front gardens lined the streets. A few people walked their dogs. Children played in the distance. Thomas sighed. At 38 years old, he had spent 15 years on the force. Each day felt the same as the last. He checked his watch again. That's when he spotted it. A black car with dark windows rolled through a stop sign at the corner of Maple and Oak Street. Thomas sat up straight. Finally, something to do. He turned on his patrol lights and followed the car. It pulled over right away at the side of the road near the town park. Thomas noticed the military base sticker on the back window. As he got out of his police car, the driver's door of the black car opened. A tall man in plain clothes stepped out. He stood straight with perfect posture. Thomas approached with his hand resting near his belt. "License and registration," Thomas said firmly. He didn't smile or say hello. "May I ask what I did wrong, officer?" The man's voice was calm and steady. Thomas pointed back toward the intersection. "You rolled through that stop sign back there. I need to see your ID. Now." The man reached slowly for his wallet in his back pocket. "I apologize if I didn't come to a complete stop. I'm General Robert Bennett. I'm heading to the—" "Sure you are," Thomas interrupted with a short laugh. "And I'm the Prime Minister." Thomas didn't believe him. In his experience, people often lied to avoid tickets. Thomas had heard every excuse in the book over his years on the force. General Bennett held out his wallet, showing an official military ID card with his photo and rank clearly visible. But Thomas barely glanced at it. His mind was already made up. "Step away from the car," Thomas ordered. "Put your hands where I can see them." "Officer, there seems to be a misunderstanding," Bennett said, keeping his voice level. "If you'll just check my ID properly, hands where I can see them." Thomas's voice got louder. Two women walking nearby stopped to watch. General Bennett slowly raised his hands to shoulder height. His face showed both surprise and controlled anger. Thomas moved forward quickly, grabbed Bennett's wrists, and put handcuffs on him. "You're making a serious mistake," Bennett said quietly as Thomas pushed him against the side of the car. "Save it for the station," Thomas snapped. He picked up the wallet that had fallen during the handcuffing. More neighbors had started to gather, watching from their lawns. Some took out their phones to record what was happening. Thomas called for another officer to help take the man to the station. As they waited, he searched the car but found nothing suspicious. Just a briefcase with papers marked with official military stamps. Officer Lily Edwards arrived 10 minutes later. She looked confused when she saw the well-dressed man in handcuffs. "What's the charge?" she asked Thomas. "Failure to stop at a sign, fake military ID, and being uncooperative with police," Thomas answered. Lily looked unsure as she helped put General Bennett into the back of Thomas's patrol car. Bennett kept his head high, his face showing no fear, only disappointment. "I've served this country for 30 years, Bennett said, as Thomas closed the door. "One phone call will clear this up." Thomas ignored him and drove to the station. His mind, he had caught someone trying to pretend to be an important military officer. He thought about how his boss would praise him for being so alert. What Thomas didn't know was that his boss, Chief William Parker, had just had lunch with the commander of Westfield Military Base yesterday. They had discussed the arrival of the new deputy commander, Lieutenant General Robert Bennett. As Thomas proudly led his handcuffed suspect into the police station, the front desk officer's eyes grew wide with shock. The phone at the desk was already ringing. Thomas was about to learn that he had made the biggest mistake of his career, but sometimes the greatest mistakes become the most important turning points in a person's life. At the police station, Thomas felt proud as he led General Bennett through the front doors. The man still had his hands cuffed behind his back. Thomas nodded to James, the officer at the front desk, who was just putting down the phone. James's face had turned pale. "Wilson, who is this man?" James asked, his voice shaking a little. "Someone claiming to be a general," Thomas replied with a small laugh. "Caught him running a stop sign. He showed me a fake military ID." James looked back and forth between Thomas and Bennett. Did you actually check the ID properly? Before Thomas could answer, the door to Chief Parker's office flew open. The chief stood in the doorway, his face red with anger. "Wilson, my office! Now!" he shouted. Thomas felt a small knot of worry in his stomach. He hadn't seen the chief this angry in years. He turned to James. "Take him to room 3. James stood up quickly. "Sir, I'll take care of General Bennett. Maybe we should remove those handcuffs right away." Thomas frowned as he walked to the chief's office. Why was James acting so strange? Chief Parker closed the door behind Thomas. On his desk sat a phone with the call still connected. The chief pointed to the chair across from him. "Do you have any idea who you just arrested, Wilson?" Chief Parker asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Some guy with a fake military ID claiming to be a general," Thomas said, but his confidence was fading. "That's Lieutenant General Robert Bennett, Deputy Commander of Westfield Base." The chief's voice rose with each word. "I just got off the phone with General Thompson, the base commander, who's demanding to know why one of his senior officers is in handcuffs at my station." Thomas felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath him. "But the ID looked—" "The ID was real, Wilson. Did you even bother to check it properly? Or did you see someone different from yourself and jump to conclusions?" For the first time in his 15 years on the force, Thomas had no words. He simply stared at his hands. Chief Parker walked around the desk and stood over Thomas. "General Bennett arrived last week to take up his new post. He's decorated with medals for bravery. He's respected across the entire military." Thomas felt sick. "I didn't know." "That's the problem. You didn't want to know." Chief Parker sat down heavily in his chair. "This isn't just about you anymore, Wilson. This is about our whole department. The press will have this story by dinner time." Thomas thought about the people with phones recording the arrest. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "You're suspended, effective immediately. Turn in your badge and gun." Thomas slowly placed them on the desk. 15 years of work, and now this. "Can I apologize to him?" "That's up to General Bennett. But first I need to try to fix this mess. Wait outside." Thomas sat on a bench in the hallway for almost an hour. Officers walked past, some avoiding his eyes, others glaring at him. Word had spread quickly. Finally, Chief Parker called him back in. To Thomas's surprise, General Bennett was sitting in the office too, no longer wearing handcuffs. He looked calm and serious in the chair next to the desk. "Officer Wilson," Chief Parker said, "General Bennett has been incredibly gracious about this whole situation. He's declining to press charges for unlawful detention." Thomas looked at the general with disbelief. "Why would you do that, General?" Bennett studied Thomas for a long moment. "Officer Wilson, I've spent my career learning that punishment without education changes nothing. Pressing charges won't help anyone understand anything better." Chief Parker cleared his throat. "General Bennett has requested a private word with you. I'll be outside." When they were alone, Thomas struggled to speak. "Sir, I'm deeply sorry for—" "Save it," General Bennett said firmly. "I don't want your apology yet. I want you to understand why what you did was wrong." "I misjudged you," Thomas admitted. "You did more than that. You refused to see me as a person. You looked at me and made instant assumptions based on what you saw." Thomas couldn't meet his eyes. "I've commanded thousands of men and women from all backgrounds," Bennett continued. "I've learned that the best way to judge someone is by their character and actions, not by how they look." "I understand," Thomas whispered. "No, I don't think. You do. Not yet." General Bennett stood up. "But maybe now you'll start to learn. That's why I'm not pressing charges. This isn't the end for you, Wilson. It's a beginning, if you're brave enough to face it." With that, he walked out, leaving Thomas alone with the weight of his mistake and the first glimmer of understanding. Thomas sat alone in his small apartment that night, staring at the wall. The TV played in the background, but he wasn't watching. His phone kept ringing, friends from the force probably calling about what had happened. He let it go to voicemail each time, His suspension would last 2 weeks while the department investigated the incident. 2 weeks without pay. 2 weeks to think about what he had done. Around midnight, he finally turned on his computer. His name was already in the local news. Officer suspended after wrongful arrest of military general, the headline read. Below it was a photo someone had taken of General Bennett in handcuffs. Thomas closed the computer quickly. He couldn't face it. The next morning, he woke up late. With no job to go to, he didn't know what to do with himself. He made coffee and looked out his kitchen window. Across the street, Mrs. Jones was getting her mail. When she saw him in the window, she quickly looked away and hurried back inside. Word had spread through the neighborhood, too. Thomas decided to drive to his sister Emma's house in the next town over. She had always been honest with him, even when it hurt. Emma opened the door with her usual smile, but it faded when she saw his face. I heard what happened, she said, letting him in. It's all over the news. They sat at her kitchen table, and Emma poured him tea. You want to talk about it? She asked. Thomas shook his head, then changed his mind. How did I get here, Em? I used to be a good cop. Emma looked at him carefully. Can I be completely honest with you, Tommy? He nodded. You've been changing over the years. Getting harder, more suspicious. Dad was the same way before he retired from the force. Thomas frowned. Being compared to their father wasn't a compliment. Their dad had been a bitter man by the end of his career. Remember when you first became a police officer? Emma continued. You talked about helping people, being part of the community. When did that change? Thomas thought about it. There wasn't one moment, but many small ones. Years of seeing people at their worst. The habit of expecting trouble. The way other officers talked in the break room. I don't know if I can go back to the force after this, he admitted. Maybe that's not the question you should be asking yourself, Emma said. Maybe the question is, what kind of person do you want to be, whether you're a police officer or not? The question stayed with Thomas as he drove home that evening. He stopped at the local corner store for some milk. The store owner, Mr. Clark, had always been friendly with him. Tonight, Mr. Clark barely nodded when Thomas entered. As Thomas reached for the milk, he heard 2 young men talking in the next aisle. That's him, the cop who arrested the general. One whispered. What a joke, the other replied. My cousin's in the army. Says that general has saved dozens of lives in combat. Thomas quickly paid and left. He sat in his car for a long time, not starting the engine. The next day, Thomas found himself driving to Oak Ridge Library. He wasn't sure why until he was inside talking to the librarian. Do you have any books about bias? Or maybe something about different experiences in America? The librarian, surprised but helpful, showed him to a section with several books. Thomas had never been much of a reader, but he checked out 3 books and spent the rest of the day reading. In the evening, his former partner, Officer Lily Edwards, called again. This time, Thomas answered. How are you holding up? She asked. Not great, he admitted. How bad is it at the station? Pretty bad. Chief Parker is doing damage control. The mayor's office called. Thomas winced. And General Bennett? That's actually why I'm calling, Lily said. He's going to be speaking at the community center tomorrow. A talk about leadership and understanding. I thought you might want to know. After they hung up, Thomas paced his apartment. The thought of facing General Bennett again made his stomach tight with shame. But avoiding him wouldn't solve anything. That night, Thomas barely slept. He kept thinking about what Emma had said, about what kind of person he wanted to be, about General Bennett's words in the chief's office. By morning, he had made his decision. He showered, put on clean clothes, and drove to the community center. His hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The parking lot was nearly full. Thomas parked in the back and walked slowly toward the entrance. Each step felt heavy. He didn't know what would happen inside, but he knew he had to face it, not just for his career, but for himself. The community center was packed. Thomas slipped in through the back door and found a seat in the last row. He kept his head down, but he still noticed a few people pointing at him and whispering. At the front of the room, Mayor Helen Davis was speaking at a small podium. "It's my great honor to welcome Lieutenant General Robert Bennett to our town. Though his introduction to Oak Ridge was..." She paused. "Not what we would have hoped for. He has graciously agreed to speak with us today about leadership, community, and understanding." The audience clapped as General Bennett walked to the podium. He wore his full military uniform covered in medals and ribbons. He stood tall and confident as he looked out at the crowd. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I was asked to speak about leadership today, but I'd like to talk about something more basic, seeing each other as human beings." Thomas sat very still, afraid to draw attention to himself. "In my 30 years of military service," Bennett continued, "I've learned that the strongest teams are built when people from different backgrounds work together. But that can only happen when we put aside our quick judgments about each other." The general spoke for almost an hour. He told stories about soldiers who had saved each other's lives despite coming from completely different worlds. He talked about mistakes he had made as a young officer. He spoke about communities healing after difficult times. "We all make mistakes," Bennett said toward the end. "The question is, what do we learn from them? Do we get defensive and angry, or do we use them as a chance to grow?" When the talk ended, people stood up and clapped loudly. Many lined up to speak with the general. Thomas remained in his seat, unsure what to do. Part of him wanted to leave quietly. The braver part of him knew he needed to stay. After most people had left, Thomas finally approached the front of the room. General Bennett was talking with Mayor Davis, but he looked up as Thomas got closer. The mayor's smile disappeared. "Officer Wilson," she said coldly. "I'm surprised to see you here." "It's just Thomas right now, ma'am," he replied quietly. "I'm suspended." General Bennett studied Thomas's face. "Would you give us a moment, Mayor Davis?" he asked. When they were alone, an uncomfortable silence fell between them. Thomas worked up his courage to speak first. "Your talk was very powerful, sir. But that's not why you came here today, is it?" Bennett asked. Thomas shook his head. "No, sir. I came to apologize properly. What I did was wrong. Not just as a police officer, but as a person." Bennett nodded slowly. "And what have you been doing with your time off?" The question surprised Thomas. "Thinking a lot. Reading some books I should have read years ago. Talking with my sister about the kind of person I've become." "And what have you learned?" Thomas took a deep breath. "That I've been seeing threats instead of people. That I've let myself become someone I never wanted to be." For the first time, Bennett's serious expression softened slightly. "That's a start." Thomas hesitated, then asked, "Can I ask you something, sir? Why didn't you press charges against me? You had every right to." Bennett gestured to the chairs nearby and they both sat down. "In the military, we have a saying, 'Mission first, people always.' Do you know what that means?" Thomas shook his head. "It means that while we must complete our objectives, how we treat people matters just as much. Punishing you might have made me feel better for a day. But would it have changed anything about how you see the world?" Thomas thought about this. "I don't know, sir, but I do know that your mercy has affected me more than any punishment would have." Bennett looked out the window for a moment. "My father was arrested once when I was a boy. An officer assumed he was breaking into our own home when he'd just forgotten his key. My father never trusted police again." Thomas felt the weight of those words. "The gap between our communities is already too wide," Bennett continued. Making it wider wasn't going to help anyone. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Bennett asked, "What will you do when your suspension ends?" Thomas had been thinking about this question for days. "I'm not sure I deserve to wear the badge again." "That's not for me to decide," Bennett said. "But our town needs officers who can learn from their mistakes, who can build bridges instead of walls." As Thomas left the community center, he felt something he hadn't expected. Not just shame, but a small spark of hope. The conversation with General Bennett had shown him a path forward, difficult as it might be. His phone rang. It was Chief Parker. Wilson, I need to see you tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. sharp. Thomas's heart raced as he drove home. Tomorrow would decide his future. But whatever happened, he knew he wasn't the same person who had made that arrest 1 week ago. Thomas arrived at the police station at 8:45 the next morning. His palms were sweaty as he walked through the front doors. Officer James at the front desk gave him a small nod, which was more than Thomas had expected. Chief is waiting for you, James said, pointing to the office. Thomas knocked on Chief Parker's door and entered. To his surprise, the chief wasn't alone. Sitting in one of the chairs was General Bennett, and in the other was Dr. Linda Murray, who ran the town's cultural center. Wilson, sit down, Chief Parker said, pointing to the remaining empty chair. Thomas sat, feeling uncomfortable under their gazes. The chief looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. I'll get straight to the point, Chief Parker began. The town council met yesterday about your situation. Some members wanted you fired immediately. Thomas nodded, accepting this news. He had expected it. However, the chief continued, General Bennett spoke to the council on your behalf. Thomas turned to the general with surprise. You did? Bennett nodded. I told them that firing you would solve nothing. It would be an easy solution that avoids the real problem. Chief Parker leaned forward. So here's what's going to happen. Your suspension will last 1 month total, not the original 2 weeks. During that time, you will complete an intensive training program with Dr. Murray here. Dr. Murray spoke up. I run a program that helps people understand bias and build community connections. It's not easy work, Thomas. It requires looking honestly at yourself. I'm willing to do that, Thomas said quietly. There's more, Chief Parker added. General Bennett has suggested that you also volunteer at the Veterans Center on base. Many of the veterans there come from backgrounds very different from yours. You'll work there 3 days a week during your suspension. Thomas felt a mix of emotions. Relief that he wasn't being fired, nervousness about the program, and gratitude toward General Bennett. Why are you helping me? He asked the general directly. Bennett's face remained serious. Because firing one officer doesn't fix a broken system, and because I believe people can change when given the right opportunity. After the meeting, Thomas walked with Dr. Murray to her car. We start tomorrow, she said. Be prepared for some difficult conversations. I will, Thomas promised. The next 4 weeks were the hardest of Thomas's life. Dr. Murray's program forced him to examine beliefs he had never questioned. He read books, watched videos, and participated in uncomfortable discussions about race, power, and community. At the Veterans Center, he met men and women who had served their country but still faced prejudice when they returned home. He heard their stories, saw their struggles, and slowly began to understand. Many people at both places were cold to him at first. They had seen the news. They knew what he had done. But as the weeks passed, as they saw him listening and changing, some began to warm up. One veteran named Michael, who had lost a leg in combat, became something like a friend. You know, he told Thomas one day, most people wouldn't have the guts to show up here after what happened. That says something about you. On Thomas's last day of suspension, he met with Chief Parker again. Your evaluation from Dr. Murray is positive, the chief said. She says you've shown real growth. I've tried, Thomas said honestly. The question is, what happens now? Do you want to come back to the force? Thomas had thought long about this. Yes, but not as the same officer I was before. I want to help change things. Chief Parker studied him. That won't be easy. Some officers won't understand. Some citizens won't trust you. I know. But I think I can do more good inside the department than outside it. The next Monday, Thomas returned to work. As he expected, some officers barely spoke to him. Others watched him with curiosity. His new partner, Officer Rodriguez, seemed willing to give him a chance. 2 months after returning to duty, Thomas was helping at a car accident scene when he noticed a familiar face. General Bennett was standing among the onlookers. After the scene was cleared, Thomas approached him. "General Bennett, I didn't expect to see you here." "I was passing by," Bennett replied. "You handled that well." They walked together for a few minutes in silence. "It's still hard," Thomas admitted. "Changing the way I think, the way I act. Sometimes I catch myself slipping back into old habits." Bennett nodded. "Change is never finished, Officer Wilson. It's a daily choice." As they reached the corner, Bennett extended his hand. Thomas shook it, feeling the weight of everything that had happened between them. "Thank you," Thomas said, "for giving me another chance." "You earned it," Bennett replied. "Now make it count." Thomas watched as General Bennett walked away. He knew his journey was just beginning. There would be more mistakes, more learning, more growth ahead. But for the first time in years, he felt like he was facing in the right direction. That evening, as Thomas drove home, he passed the stop sign where it had all started. He came to a complete stop, looked both ways, and continued on, moving forward with care and awareness of the world around him.